What's going on, everybody? All right, it's Wednesday. Wednesday is Q&A day. Excited for 5 more great questions. I can't say this enough. I appreciate everybody who takes the time to submit a question for the Q&A episodes. I had a lot of great questions this week. If I didn't use your question this week, again, please just be patient. I literally keep them all listed. I will get to them all. If you have a question for this coming week, feel free to ask it. Again, the thing that I love about the Q&A episodes is it's what you all are interested in talking about. So it's really you guys get to pick the topic of whatever it is that we go through. So there are times I'm like, well, I think people would be interested in hearing about this. Well, I know at least one person is interested in hearing about whatever your topic is. So don't hesitate down below in the comments to simply type out your question. I'll add it to the list. Look forward to covering them. Again, I do 5 a week, and I absolutely love doing it. Now, I didn't mention this on my Monday video. For some reason, I didn't mention that on over the weekend, I went to a card show with my dad. And it's a pretty big show. It's probably the best card show. Is it the best card show in Northern California? It's pretty close. Sometimes there's a lot of Pokemon. Sometimes there's some Pokemon. There was a middle to smaller amount than normal at this particular one. There were some really good things on display that had me really, really thinking. I made 3 purchases. One, I would say, is a pretty decent sized purchase. And then I had a couple of smaller purchases. But I will explain all of that on Friday. I'm going to do the card show video. It's been crazy with everything. Again, we're in the middle of Lucy's soccer season, her college soccer season. Monday was a live stream. Thank you to everybody who showed up. The live streams are so much fun. And obviously, thank you to my guests, Darren, Return to Collecting, Tony, Southern Collector 14, and Mr. Mike Petty. I appreciate those guys as always. Let me know down below in the comments. Do you want me to stick with this same crew for my live streams, the homeboys? Or do you want me to mix it up? Do you want me to do one thing 1 month, another thing another month? Let me know that down in the comments below as well. All right, so Friday card show video, how that went. I'll show you my pickups. I'll show you the show. A lot of great stuff. Got some dealer info to share with all of you so that if you see something that you're interested in, you can reach out. As always, I try to do that. A couple of the better dealers had some really, really great stuff. It was a really good show. All right, here we go. Question number 1 this week, right here. You mentioned you might use it, and I thought you were going to in this episode, but you didn't get there, so I want to ask again. What happens when a grading company, via AI, can recognize a card that was graded prior, then cracked and resubmitted? Honestly, they could do this with current scanning technology. PSA's Terms of Service states they own the slab. So if you crack it out and resubmit, and they have the ability to recognize the card, what's next? Is it the end of unbiased second looks? Because now they will know what their prior grade was, despite it being returned without the original slab? Okay, this seems like a great point. It seems like a logical thought. If you have taken a card and you've sent it to PSA, and PSA has scanning technology, they have told us that they scan every card and they identify every card because every card is slightly different. There's slightly, different variations in the paper that is used, slightly different textures and things. And they create basically a fingerprint is how they describe it at PSA of each card that comes through. So if a card is submitted and then resubmitted, they're able to identify it. Now, the cards that are serial numbered, really easy to, really easy to know if that has been submitted before. That is all in their database. So if they wanted to look up a card and say, gee, this number 9 out of 25 of this refractor card has already shown up and we gave it an 8, so why grade it again? We'll just give it an 8 because we know it's an 8. So thanks for the donation on the money, but it's an 8 just like it was last time. That's what a lot of us would think. But remember a couple of things. First, PSA is in the business of making money. And so PSA is not in the business of suggesting that you not resubmit a card. If you knew that card got a certain grade and it had no chance of ever again getting a different grade, you wouldn't resubmit it, which is bad for business. Now, businessmen want repeat customers. And I mean, I think that's part of it. Now, again, that you would say, but wait, if it got an 8 last time, it should get an 8 next time. And if we evaluated it once before at an 8, then they should just look it up and give it an 8. But remember, the heads at PSA have said many times that there are ranges in how the grading falls. There are standards, there are ranges, there are opinions of particular graders. So they even readily say themselves, they say that a card won't necessarily get the same grade each and every time.
Doesn't mean it's necessarily going to get the same grade, because it's a grader's opinion and there's ranges and standards. So it could grade something differently. Just because it got a PSA 8 the first time doesn't mean it's always going to get a PSA 8. It could get a 9, it could get a 7, it could get a 7.5.
So one of the reasons, now a lot of people would say that's not okay. That's not okay that's the case, but it's the case. And one of the reasons it's the case, and one of the reasons I think they're okay with it, is because it allows people to resubmit. If the same card got the same grade every time, that would probably be the best thing for those of us in the collecting community, because we would know that that's the grade and they stand by the grade. But that's not good for business. That's not good for business. Now, a lot of us, and I've been harsh on PSA. And I know I just got 3 thumbs downs in the comments because of what I just said. That's fine. Congratulations. But my thought is this. To a certain extent, it seems reasonable. It seems reasonable that it would be a different grade. The problem is that us in the card collecting community has put so much value on the grade that people are willing to pay significantly more or less depending on the grade, even the same card. But that's on us. That's not on PSA. So let me just give you an example. So high school students take AP tests. And AP tests are basically, you take a class in high school, it's sort of like an honors class, and then at the end, you take a test. And if you perform well enough in the test, then a lot of colleges will give you college credit for having that knowledge, and it will be like you took the class in college. And if you perform below that grade or that threshold of, depending on the college, depends on the threshold, could be a 3, could be a 4, 5, depends on the college. Long story short, if you do really well, you can get college credit. If you don't do really well, you won't get college credit. Now, there are teachers all over the country that will go to one central place. Like, for example, for a long time, I think one of the history AP testings was done in Louisville. So in Louisville, Kentucky, all these teachers who are trained on how to evaluate this test, they go to this one place They all grade tests for like 3 days. Isn't it possible that one teacher who's grading an essay might say, this essay is only worthy of a 2. But this other teacher, if they had gotten it, they might have deemed it worthy of a 3. Now, they have rubrics, they have standards, they have ranges, and it does seem possible that 2 different people could evaluate that slightly differently, which might make one person fall into receiving college credit and one person not. But because it's kind of a double blind on you don't know who you're grading, you don't know which grader you got, on average, it's probably pretty similar, but it could be different. So in a situation like grading a card, it's the same thing. Again, as long as it's done by a human being, human beings have differences. Now, am I defending PSA? I don't think I'm defending PSA. I think what I'm doing is I'm explaining that whenever you have 2 different humans evaluate something, they're not likely to come to the same exact conclusion. The conclusions might be slightly different. And if I graded the same assignment from a student 5 times, it's possible that one time I give it a 78% and one time I give it a 76%. It's possible that I give it a 79 one time and a 77. It's always going to be pretty close. It's going to be pretty darn close. But it might be different enough to fall over the threshold. And I know that's what a lot of people say is they go, that's the problem with grading. The problem with grading is it could be a 7, it could be a 6, but the difference between a 6 and a 7 could be $1,000. And that is the problem. But whose fault is that? Isn't that our fault? Isn't that the person who goes, I'm willing to pay way more for that one because it got a 7 than that one that got a 6. Now, the part where I get a little sketch is when there's a card that gets a 4 and then it gets sent back in and it gets a 7 or vice versa. The same card, the grade changes a lot. That's where I am like, but I do kind of understand why a 8 might become a 9 or a 9 might become an 8. That seems reasonable when human beings are doing it. So, I don't know. Was I just hard on PSA or was I easy on PSA? I think I was a little bit of both. Was I hard on the card community? At the end of the day, the moral of the story is the grade is one opinion, and the grade is not the rule of law. It is not a fact. That's it. That is the whole point of what I'm saying. The grade is not a fact. The grade is an opinion, which, by the way, yesterday, episode 2 of Surface Issues with myself and Mike Junkwax Hero posted on YouTube. The audio version on podcast formats posted on Saturday. Thank you to everyone who has been supporting us on that. And we talked about what's the difference between fact and opinion. Is a 7 in PSA a fact or an opinion? I declare it to be an opinion. This one says, I wanted to test a theory with you. Love to hear your thoughts. Do you think there is a difference between a sports fan who collects cards and a card fan who follows sports? Just a theory. There is absolutely a difference. There's absolutely a difference between a sports fan who collects cards and a card collector who likes sports. You don't have to. I mean, you don't. Kevin O'Leary. Kevin O'Leary was part of that group that bought the big Kobe Jordan card. If you told me he never watched basketball, I'd believe it. Now, is he a card collector or is he a card investor? That's a whole nother thing. I'll use myself as an example. I watch my Niner games. I love watching my 49er games. And I don't have many 49er cards. Not at least of the modern players. I don't really have many Brock Purdy's. I don't have many Christian McCaffreys. Maybe I should. But I don't. So I am a sports fan of my 49ers, but I don't collect their cards. I also collect cards of guys that I've never watched play. I like hockey. I don't watch much hockey, although playoff hockey is fantastic. But I still want a Mario Lemieux rookie card and a Wayne Gretzky rookie card. But I don't watch hockey, but I want their cards. So I don't think you definitely don't have to be a sports fan to like sports cards. My buddy Dylan, Double D, he readily admits he rarely watches baseball anymore. But he collects modern baseball cards. He has a whole bunch of Aaron Judge cards. But he doesn't watch baseball cards. I've been talking about Dylan a lot lately. Maybe I should have Dylan on. Dylan, you got to come on soon because we've been talking a lot, and I've been talking about you a lot. So we should talk. We should get together and do a video soon on something. I don't know what. But Dylan doesn't watch a lot of baseball. But Dylan collects baseball cards. So there are also people who are huge fans of their team and they collect. Keith, the Lonely Basement, baseball cards. He collects Yankee cards and he follows the Yankees closely. Mookie follows Mets games super closely and he collects cards. So is there a difference? There is a difference. I don't think either way it's mutually exclusive. You don't have to collect cards to be a sports fan. You don't have to be a sports fan to collect cards. Is there a difference? Yeah, I suppose there's a difference. There are some people who are really avid fans of their teams and they're avid collectors of the players of their teams. And there are other people who are avid collectors but don't really follow it that closely. I think I answered the question. I believe that it's both. You could be either. I don't think it's the same thing. I think that it could be different. This one states, another fantastic episode. First, thank you for answering my question from a couple weeks ago. Right now, my biggest fear in the hobby is all this talk about stricter standards in PSA grading vintage cards, and I'm already seeing the results of this. New collectors coming into the hobby wanting to buy vintage cards, but can't trust that the grades are accurate in old slabs, and feel that only new slabs can be trusted. Most new collectors don't have the experience to judge a card on their own, and hearing and seeing all this negativity about old slabs is causing a divide between the same grade that's, in my opinion, only going to get wider. Your thoughts on this, I would like to know. So I totally respect what you're saying. I totally respect that you say my biggest fear for the hobby is that nobody can really trust grades as much because old grading standards seem to be easier than current grading standards. Some grading standards seem to at times change, like even the published grading standards have changed. Things are clearly kind of a moving target. And I understand where you're coming from because one of the things that grading can do is it can protect a novice collector because the novice collector doesn't know necessarily that card is mint, that card is X-mint. I literally have some friends who aren't really card collectors or at least not active card collectors. And I'll show them a card that I pick up in like a 4. And they'll go, man, how's that not a 10? And I'm like, well, there's a lot of reasons why it's not a 10. So through a novice eye, through the eye of a person who is just kind of casual about it, they don't see the little details that might separate a super high end card from a mid-grade card. And one of the things that grading I think does do is it does to at least some extent protect those people. But we went from the Wild West for years where it was all about knowledge of condition. Like it was the people who knew condition had tons of power over people who didn't know condition. And if you didn't know condition and you didn't trust your own eye, you probably were just like, oh, I thought it was nice. I guess it's not nice. Oh, that little thing right there, like that's not supposed to be there. So what grading did is it took it from the Wild West to where there's at least some policing of it. And it's not really policing of it, but what happened was I think that the pendulum swung all the way from the Wild West to the opposite where it was like authoritarian. It was like a 7 is a 7 is a 7. A 6 is a 6. A 6 is never as good as a 7. A 7 is never as good as an 8. A 3 is clearly inferior to a 5. And I feel like we went from the Wild West where it was all kind of like nobody really knew, unless you knew. And then it went to, well, they told me so. So that's a fact. And like I just said a second ago, a grade is not a fact. A grade is an opinion. So I think we went from this thing where there were no outside third-party opinions. It was just completely up to the two people involved in the deal to we introduced a third-party opinion, which I think, in my opinion, brings some value in. Some people are super anti-grading. I think grading provides some value. But what grading really does, is grading is an opinion. And grading is a data point. It's not the data point. It is not the end of the debate. It is one opinion in the debate. So I hear what you're saying about you fear it. Your biggest fear for the hobby is that grading standards are not as trusted. I actually kind of feel the opposite. I actually feel like what happened was collectors and dealers had all the power before. And the knowledgeable collector had tons more power. And the less knowledgeable collector had very little power. That's how it was. That we gave all of the power to the grading companies. We just handed it over. We said, whatever they say goes. Oh, they said it's an 8. I guess it's an 8. So we should charge 8 prices. They say it's an 8. Well, there must not be a mistake. But over time, and say what you will about social media, say what you will about YouTube, say what you will about, different people in the hobby sharing experiences and things. But what I think one of the biggest benefits of the hobby community being connected, like it is now, like I am sitting here in Sacramento, and you could be watching this from across the world. By sharing opinions, by sharing evidence, by sharing experiences, what we now have done is we have taken the power back. And over time, what has happened over time is enough people said, man, this card got a 6 that has writing on it. They made a mistake. Oh, look at this. This card was a 4. I cracked it and resubmitted it. Now it's a 6. Oh, look at this. I had it in an 8. I cracked it and resubmitted it. Now it's a 5. What all of that research, and that's basically what it is it's research. What all of that research has done is it's led everyone to realize that the grade is not a fact. It's just an opinion. And by being an opinion, it gives us the power back. When people believed that grades were a fact and not an opinion, all of the power was held by them. So what was happening is if you were able to get that card in a high grade, it was worth more 100% of the time. And what has happened now is people go, this is a 5, but this is a really low-end 5. This is a old grade 5. And this 5 over here, this 5 is a really nice 5 that is an undergraded 5. So these two 5s are no longer the same. That to me is a movement that is good for the hobby. Because what happened was we handed all of our power, we just took all of our chips and pushed them to the center of the table and said, whatever you say, grading companies. And now what we've done is we say, well, thanks for your opinion. It's like going to the doctor and the doctor's saying, I got bad news for you. You have a brain tumor. And you go, I'm going to get another opinion. And then you go to the other doctor and they say, I don't know what that guy was talking about. You don't have a brain tumor. How is that possible? How is it possible that one could say I do and the other could say I don't? Well, because unless you're physically looking at the brain tumor, it's just an opinion. The same thing with cards. I like third-party opinions. I believe that SGC and PSA and BGS, I believe that has helped the hobby grow because it gives an opinion, a third-party opinion to a person who may not have a real strong knowledge base of what the actual condition of a card is. It kind of helps educate them on the approximate range of the quality of the card. But now that we've been able to share experiences and we've been able to share our thoughts and our opinions and show, look, this is what happened when I did this. This is what happened when I did this. This card sold for this. This one sold for this. We've started to take the hobby control back. And that is where it belongs. The hobby belongs to the people, and the control of the hobby belongs to the collectors. And I believe it's a good thing. I do believe that. And to your point about some new collectors not knowing that they're all different, that's one of the reasons I keep beating the drum. The horse is dead, and I'm just beating it with things about grading. And the reason why is because there are always new people showing up. There are always collectors who aren't fully convinced yet. I think when there's evidence to present that the grade is an opinion and not a fact, I believe that that is an opportunity that we want to, as advocates of the hobby, of ensuring the health of the hobby, I think it's important that we continue to share that. I'm not going to sit here and say that grading is the evil empire of card collecting. I don't think that. I think it brings a lot of good, but it also has some bad components to it. And when there's good things that are happening or bad things that are happening, I want to share it so that when those people are coming back into the hobby or entering the hobby, there's a place where they can say, oh, okay, so it's not a fact, it's an opinion. That's always my goal. And that gave us control back. This one says, hey, Greg, question for a future episode. If you were to pick anywhere in the United States to live based solely on the card hobby, where would you pick? What would be the determining factors in that choice? Access to card shows, easy proximity to fellow YouTube creators. Thanks, and I look forward to your answer if you decide to share. This is a fun question, and I would say I first read this question like Friday. And when I read it, I've thought more about this question, for whatever reason. I've thought more about this question than any question I've gotten in a while, which says, I don't know what that says about me. I went to a card show with my dad over the weekend, which I mentioned earlier. And I have a tradition that whenever I'm driving to or from a card show with my dad or with myself, I call Mookie Chilson. I tell him how it went. And I was talking to Mookie on Saturday, and I said, Mookie, we're doing this show. This is what's going on. And he said, I am driving with Sammy Thunder on Sunday to the Philly card show. And I was like, now I'm jealous. There are so many shows that happen in the Northeast. There's the, East Coast National. There's the Philly show. That, Strongsville is in that area. There's Fanatics Fest, which even though I would still be interested in attending a Fanatics Fest. There's, you guys know them all. They're always up there. There's always a show going on in the Northeast. A lot of my hobby friends live in the Northeast. Now, I have hobby friends that live in other places too. People say, oh, you and Petty both live in California. Petty is a 7-hour drive from me. Yes, he is in California. 7 hours away. And, I have friends in Texas. I have friends in Colorado. I have friends in Florida. I have friends in the Carolinas. I have friends in Pennsylvania. And you guys know where you live. So if I were to pick a place to live, I would want to live near where some of my friends live and central to where a lot of the shows are. I actually think the Pennsylvania area, especially kind of like eastern Pennsylvania, is probably a pretty good spot because it's not crazy far if you wanted to go to Chicago, where the National is a lot. It's not that far from Strongsville. It's not that far from Cleveland, which sometimes hosts the National. It's not that far from Shriners or the Fanatics Fest. It's obviously right at the Philly show. So I kind of think if I would really choose, I think, Eastern Pennsylvania. If I had to pick a place. I also have several guys that are in the hobby that I really like that live in the Philly area. So I would be able to run into them or hang out with them even. So that's probably what I would choose. Now, I have a few guys that I'm really good friends with. Not just card friends, but really good friends with, who are also card friends, that live in that area, that part of me would say, man, it'd be really fun to live in the same town as, Tony Southern Collector or Mookie Chilson or Darren Return to Collecting. I mean, to name a few. There are a lot more guys that I'm also good friends with. But part of me is like, it'd be really fun to live in the same town as them. But from the card collecting thing being central to a lot of those shows and not horribly far from where a lot of these same people live, that'd be pretty cool. So I'm going Philly. And finally, this one says, question. I know you don't give out investment advice, but I thought this would be a fun question to ponder over. If you were going to invest in potential Hall of Fame football players cards, and you thought they would go up in value once they're voted in, which players, other than the obvious, Breeze, Brady, Mahomes, Fitzgerald, J.J. Watt, Aaron Donald, would you invest in? What other players' cards do you think will be logical Hall of Fame inductees and would likely have good investment potential? All right. I have many thoughts about this one. First of all, I wouldn't. I wouldn't invest in football cards of guys who aren't in the Hall of Fame, where I think them making the Hall of Fame would make them go up in value. I wouldn't do that. Now, I have been to the Baseball Hall of Fame. I have been to the Football Hall of Fame. There are way more guys in the Football Hall of Fame that I don't know who they are than the Baseball Hall of Fame. I feel like the Baseball Hall of Fame is more of a big deal than the Football Hall of Fame. Now, both of them are obviously a big deal. Don't get me wrong. But if you make it into the Baseball Hall of Fame, that is a club where most people know who you are. And in the Football Hall of Fame, because there's so many different positions that do so many different things. I mean, baseball, a lot of whether you make the Hall of Fame or not, like an overwhelming amount of it is as a player is how you hit. And as a pitcher, how many stats you compiled. Well, stats for hitters too. It's not so much if you're a second baseman versus a third baseman, it's like, oh, this guy was a slightly better third baseman. There are a lot of really good defensive players that aren't in the Hall of Fame. A lot. Omar Vizquel. I mean, Greg Nettles. I mean, there are a lot of Keith Hernandez, Don Mattingly. There's some really good defensive players. So ultimately, it's about stat compiling as hitting and stat compiling for pitching. That's kind of like what makes you in the Baseball Hall of Fame. And I'm getting off the rails, so let me pull myself back in. So I wouldn't do it because I feel like if you are in the Hall of Fame as a football player, it doesn't suddenly make you way more relevant or in a club that is clearly separated from the others. I feel like in baseball, if you aren't in the Hall of Fame and then you get in, you're like in this club that is just different. So I don't see somebody in football who's not in the Hall of Fame. Like, I love Roger Craig. Roger Craig was my guy growing up, and he absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame. But he's not in the Hall of Fame. So if Roger Craig were to make the Hall of Fame, would his 84 Topps rookie card surge in value? No, it wouldn't. It just wouldn't. It would give him another thing to inscribe on an autograph, but it wouldn't make his card surge. It wouldn't be a game changer for his collectability. Ultimately, with football, and I don't really like this so much about football card collecting, but it is so much about the quarterback. It is like the quarterback, then there's like a big drop off, and there's like wide receiver, running back, and then it's like maybe tight end. I mean, there are some incredible linebackers and linemen and safeties and cornerbacks. Their cards aren't worth jack. So I wouldn't invest in a player thinking, well, I wouldn't invest in I wouldn't invest in cards of guys who aren't already in the Hall of Fame. I personally don't invest in cards. I just buy cards and then hope they go up. Now, back to your question. You listed some, so I'm going to answer the question, but I wouldn't do this. I'll answer the question because I'm not going to just avoid it. You listed some names. You listed like Mahomes and Aaron Donald and some other guys. So my thought is, which players that you didn't list and aren't in the Hall of Fame do I think have their cards have a good amount of potential? Well, the person you didn't list, there's one that kind of jumps. I mean, there was something about Eli Manning. I think you mentioned Eli Manning in the question. I wouldn't go out and buy a bunch of Eli Manning cards, personally. Again, it's not always about did you win a title. It's not always about your stats, because there are a lot of players with a lot of stats. I mean, Dan Fouts has incredible stats, and he's in the Hall of Fame, but you could buy his rookie card for cheap, right? The guy who I think has a lot of upside potential in football cards, and isn't in the Hall of Fame and wasn't on your list, I would have said Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is and was really good. Really good. And Aaron Rodgers is a guy who a lot of people are aware of. But part of Aaron Rodgers' thing is he's a little different. And because he's a little different, I think he's alienated a lot of people. And so because he's alienated a lot of people, I don't know what his long-term card values are going to do. They definitely have some value. And there are definitely a lot of Aaron Rodgers fans. But I don't know if people are going to look back. And I don't know what he's going to do when he finally retires or say culturally that could make him, his cards values a little unstable. But Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great quarterback. And Aaron Rodgers is extremely well known. And Aaron Rodgers played on some really good teams, multiple MVPs. So I wouldn't invest in Aaron Rodgers, but of the people that you listed, who I think their cards could have a good amount of value, I'd probably say Aaron Rodgers. But again, I wouldn't do that. I don't do investment advice because that's just not the lens through which I view the hobby. I had a dealer, side note, I had a dealer at the show this weekend. Really good guy. Met him like 3 years ago. Really like running into him. Super positive guy, great guy. And he's mostly a modern guy and mostly modern like basketball. Some other stuff, but a lot of modern basketball. And he said, hey, I'm really thinking about going heavy into vintage for like long-term holds. Who do you think is a good long-term hold in vintage? And I shared my opinions. I was like, well, I kind of think these cards, he was like, give me 5 cards that are good long-term holds. Give me, and then I kind of went through my list. And he goes, well, give me 5 more. And I kind of went through my list. And I was like, I'm not saying you should invest in these. Like, this is not investment advice. But I gave some thoughts on it. Anyway. All right. That said, if you have a question for an upcoming episode, down below in the comments, leave it. Thank you to everyone on Monday for coming to Midlife Live number 9. And Friday, remember, the card show video with some pickups. It was a good show. Won't be a super long video, but I definitely took some footage, and I'll be sharing some information of some of the dealers if you want to reach out to them. So look forward to that on Friday.